Hey there, and welcome to episode 3 of Happy, Healthy, and Skeptical. We are once again excited to share our conversations with you. This is Jennifer Hobson and Christy Palermo. And as always, we want to start our discussion with a question. So, Christy, here's a heavy question for you. Have you ever felt like an imposter in maybe life, business, as a parent, in a relationship? Has this come up for you? Have you ever felt that imposter syndrome feeling?
Well, that's a heavy question to start with.
Yes, this is something that continues to happen. We start with the heavy.
Yes, let's just go for it, go right into it. And absolutely, I've definitely felt it a number of times, probably, all through life as we're going through different changes, different shifts. It could be there have been times like leveling up to be a growing in my business. There have been times I felt it, or shifting businesses. So for instance, the one that really comes to mind is I having always been a performer and dancer, circus artist, and then switching over to becoming a health coach, which I was actually doing at the same time. But and because we can all be multiple things at once, but I had this major issue, and I guess you could call it imposter syndrome, but you can also call it an identity crisis, I guess. And it was as I was leaving the performance world, that's all I ever knew. So I didn't know how, as an adult, I didn't know how to be something else also, other than, I've done fitness on the side and bartending on the side, but I was always a performer, a dancer, an artist. And so I didn't know how to be something else. I didn't I it's crazy how it comes up, like you're thinking of how are other people going to view me, which I remember thinking that, and then, you're trying to talk yourself out of it, like, well, this is what I want to do now. Like how do I transition, or how do I do them both at the same time? And actually I remember doing as I was starting to get into doing live videos, I think I did a live video or speaking thing or something on social media, like, who knows how many people even heard it, but I remember, like, just bringing it up as a point, like, we can be more than one thing, and that's really important too. So,
Right? You're not I
mhm.
think we get this idea of we're pigeonholed into this identity, right? Especially when we're kids. So much of our identity is developed when we're little, right? It's from our family or our experiences, and we kind of get this idea, whether it's talked into us, or just our perception of who we are. Like, I'm that person. I think even for me, and we didn't talk about this before, but I think for me, I've always been the serious and blunt person, and I have hard edges, and I'm not soft and cuddly. But I think I have started to transition and know that I don't have to just be that person, because that comes from who I was. But I don't know if that's necessarily who I want to be go forward, right? I think there's just so much of where we develop as kids and as we grow and go, oh my God, well, that's the person that I was before. And that's what everybody thinks I am. So I have to be that. Not that we're creating this fake persona, but we're just changing. I think there's the realization that
Yeah.
we are going to change many, many more times if we are growing in the future, right? Like, if as far as we can go into this life, we're going to continue to grow if that's what we're focused on. If not, you kind of get pigeonholed into that's who I'm always going to be because that's what people told me I am.
Oh, that's such a great point that you make, because you're touching on a personality trait that I think so many of us, we think of imposter syndrome sometimes being a thing we're going for, like maybe motherhood or a goal or changing jobs, like I said, but to pinpoint it as a personality trait that you may have grown up with, and being aware of it, and that you want to be more than that and grow, and making those decisions, I think is really important to talk about, because that can absolutely be an identity that can hold you back, really, if you're not aware that that's that's what you are, and that you're, or more wanting to be aware that you want to be more of that. That's what
Right, yeah, and I think that's the thing is, do I wanna be that person? Was that because I created that person and I loved that person, or is that because that's what somebody told me I am? Somebody told me I'm hard to love, or whatever it is, the story that you're telling yourself, and is that who you really wanna be? And I love that you said motherhood, and we had touched on this. That was a really hard one for me, and it continues to be, really this work in progress. I hadn't not seen myself with kids in my future, but it hadn't ever been a definitive. Like, I know people that they knew when they were 7 years old, they wanted to have 4 kids, and they wanted 2 boys, 1 girl, and whatever they wanted, and they had this vision of their family. Mine was always a little blurry. I wasn't sure if it was me alone, maybe me and another person, and if there was any tiny humans. So I think now that I am a mom with 2 tiny people, there's definitely been constant growth, and I think the biggest thing for me is identifying I can be a good mom. I have to work at it, and I think I'm going to be the mom that my kids deserve, but that was really hard, especially going, "Oh my god, we're having a kid. What the hell? I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know if I'm actually gonna be good at this. I don't know." I think there's a lot of us that go through, "Are we gonna be any good at this?" Whether it's being a parent, or it's being a leader in your business, or if it's just being in a relationship, right? Sometimes we're like, "I don't know if I'm gonna be any good at being a wife." Right, that was never I could have gone and gone, "I'll be fine running solo till I'm 85." That would have been okay, and I love the role of a wife, but I think my version of wife is different than somebody else's, and that's okay. But it's when we start to I think it's also expectations, right? What are the expectations of that identity or that role that someone else has being a wife? And do I actually have to be that identity? Or can I just be my version of a mom and a wife and a leader?
That word expectation. I think you hit the nail on the head on that one.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to we had discussed not only is it expectation, but it's what are we feeding our mind when we are feeling like an imposter,
Hmm.
right? I mean, what have been the things, Chrissy, that you've done when you have felt that feeling kind of, I don't know, kind of worming its way in there. Even I think sometimes I want to say into your mindset because it's definitely mine, but sometimes it's in your gut, right? It's like one of those like icky feelings. You're like, I'm not feeling good in this identity, even though I know I deserve it.
That's a really good question, because I think we all know that imposter syndrome pops up when you're already in it and realizing, like, your brain's going, abort, abort, like, I'm not supposed to be here.
Like abort mission. Wait, how did I get behind the VIP line?
Yes, how did I get here? How, for me personally in my business, oh my gosh, I'm becoming, growing to the next level in my business. Oh my goodness, like, am I going to be able to be this leader? There's so many expectations, as you're saying, but it pops up when we're already in the process of that next thing that we're going for, that we're doing, becoming a parent. So first it's identifying it and realizing. It took me a while in these couple of instances I'm thinking of that I just mentioned, that I feel like it took me a while to even realize that was the emotion coming up, and I was starting to self-sabotage myself, which I think we can do a whole nother podcast on
Yeah,
self-sabotage,
for
because
sure.
that is something that comes up outside of imposter syndrome and can be huge and such a derailer for so many of us. But it's behind that self sabotage, pinpointing why, like, why am I doing this to myself, and having these limits for ourselves. But um I just lost my train of thought where I was going to go with that.
That's all right. We can bring it back. Well, you're saying, there's the self-sabotage and, what do you do to
Oh,
get out of that?
recognizing it.
That right, you gotta
Thank you.
recognize it.
So first is recognizing it. Yeah. So see, we're real people here. Recognizing what it is, and it's yes, it's imposter syndrome. excuse me, imposter syndrome, that's the thing that I'm realizing is making me self-sabotage. That's the emotion coming up, even if I wasn't aware of it at first. So first is identifying, and then it's like, I have some work to do, and it's usually, and from what I've seen, maybe you can say too what your experience, but it's personal development work. It's stuff that I need to do on myself. And once you accept, like, okay, I have some work to do, and it's Jen and I both have some books that we've loved along the way of our personal development growth, like within our businesses. And it's just great for anybody to be working on, and growth in your own mind and where you're going. um but to be able to um do that work, and also be okay that you can do the work and do the thing at the same time. So like I mentioned before, where we can be two my instance was two businesses, two things at once, but
You have
really,
two
or
identities, right?
two
You can be
identities.
two things at one time.
Yes, two identities, as you had said before. I love that because it really is an identity, but also knowing that you can do the work and be in the process of doing the work at the same time as becoming this next person.
I love that because I think a lot of times we think we have to get to that next version of ourselves or the next goal that we're trying to hit before that imposter syndrome goes away, right? It doesn't, I don't know about you, but
100%.
every time I've ever experienced it, that if I did achieve a goal or I felt like I was growing as a person, it didn't just disappear. And to give an example for me, we had talked about it, but that identity of being a mom, right? For a long time, and even still now, I struggle with, am I good at this? There's the days, guys, I have never been a gentle parent. I am working on it. I am not great at gentle parenting, right? We all have our things that we work on. But when I really step back and go, okay, well, what's really going on with our responses and owning how I react to things, right? I think that's a big thing. We have to show that to our kids as parents, is owning things and saying sorry. Teaching a kid that an adult can say sorry is huge, and I think that's super important. But for me, it goes, oh my God, I'm not a bad parent. I'm just overstimulated, right? I'm overstimulated in this situation. So what can I do to avoid that overwhelming feeling so then I don't flip out, when this is happening and that's happening and this is happening, and really end up taking that out on the tiny human in my house. That's not on them. And I think sometimes with so many of our identities, we're trying to figure out why we're acting a certain way. And we have to take a second and go, is it really that I don't belong here? Or is it that I haven't done the work to get here and that's why I feel like an imposter? Because if you're doing the work, it doesn't mean you're perfect. It doesn't mean you're not going to make mistakes, right? And just like Christy said, you can be working on it and not have achieved it yet. And I think that's a huge thing, is we think that we have to be perfect in everything that we do. But sometimes we tell our kids, like, you don't have to be perfect, just try and try again, right? And then we don't give ourselves the same grace. We definitely don't, and I feel that's been a big one because I've never as I think in the majority of my life, I had never seen myself in the role as mom, so it's been one of the biggest things for me to learn and grow into. It's definitely been that. I've been in a lot of situations where I've been a leader, so that's where I thrive. I love being a leader and still growing. I'm not nearly where anywhere close near I wanna be, but mom has always been the biggest challenge for me at this stage in my life. And I know there'll be things down the road because it doesn't get easier. Every time I checked with every other parent, it doesn't get easier as they get bigger, right?
Exactly. I know. And so for us both to be talking about such totally different areas of
Mhm.
having imposter syndrome in this identity crisis or struggle around identity.
Yeah, we'll
um,
call it. It's our. We're kind of like the Jekyll and Hyde. Which one are we?
yes.
But I did love that you said, your personal development. I can't scream this loud enough, guys. If you're feeling, and it's not just an emotion, when I feel that imposter syndrome, it's physical for me. Like I feel like, oh my God, I don't belong where I am. This isn't
Mm.
who I am, right? You go back to the who am I? But you gotta be feeding your mind. If you're letting all the negative stuff that's going on in the world, what are you listening to? What are you reading? What are you watching? And are you feeding your mind daily with things that are supporting who you want to be? Or are you chipping away at your mindset and you're already chipping away at the belief that you are where you're supposed to be?
Hmm. And it's so different for each person when we talk about personal development. We Jen and I both love books. And so reading, you can't be distracted while reading. You're either reading or you're not. So you're so it's we definitely both, because we've had this conversation before outside of this, both really support books in that way. But if you're somebody who loves podcasts, or you love you have your thing, or maybe it's meditation work and doing that internal work. There's so many different ways to have personal development, but I really believe that getting information, and we'll probably bring this up, and we already have on our other episodes of reading and books that we can recommend, because you're getting ideas from other people who have done all kinds of other work in another area, and now you're reading through them. And so there's just so much growth there, and having both of us seen the growth in our businesses, it's just it works.
Right?
It
It
really
works.
works. And so I find that the best time to read is in the morning. And sometimes it's and we talk to a lot of people that say, "Well, I'm not a reader," but I mean, pick up a book and read 2 pages and now you're
You're a
reading.
reader.
So,
That makes
um,
you a reader.
you can either set a timer, or you can set a specific number of pages you want to read, and start small in bite-sized chunks that are achievable and successful, will make you feel successful in doing that. And you have to set the time. Like for me, it's in the morning, because that's what gets my mindset right. And I will tell you, there are many days, especially if you're just getting started out on your personal development journey, you're not going to want to. And that's
Right?
just part of it. And you know what? When you come out on the other side of even a couple pages of a good book, it makes such a difference. And then for me personally, I've been journaling for 15 years, and I find even one page of just getting that white noise out of my brain onto a piece of paper really helps my mood, my mindset for the day. So how about you, Jen?
Well, just to comment on what you said, yes, you have to set the time, because if you don't, it doesn't happen. Motivation is bullshit. Consistency is key, right? It does
Mm.
not happen.
Ding, ding,
And
ding.
right, that's the golden ticket. And I am guilty. I am not always consistent, but when I am flying high. That is when I am the most effective and I feel the best. Those thoughts of imposter syndrome, they're not creeping in when I am feeding my brain. And I think, we've talked about this a lot, but I'm here to remind you guys, there's really only two directions that we move in, no matter what we're trying to achieve in life. And that's either we're climbing towards the next best version of ourselves or towards our goals and our commitments, or we're sliding backwards. There's just no constant in life. There is nothing that stays stagnant. So you're either going up or we're sliding back down. And I think that's the biggest thing. So are you going to choose? And it doesn't have to be these huge strides. Are you just moving the needle a little bit forward every day? Or are we pulling it all the way back? And I think
Mhm.
that's the biggest thing for me is, what am I doing to move the needle towards feeling secure in that identity? And what is the next identity I want to be? Because I'm not going to be stagnant, right? I am going to grow into the next best version and the next best version because they're infinite. I'm not going to be ready until, whoever calls me to wherever I'm going and I meet myself and I go, I made it to who I was meant to be. I'm not going
It's a
to shortchange
beautiful
myself.
vision.
I'm not going to shortchange myself because there's so much potential here. I have no idea why we're here, but I'm going to freaking try as hard as I can to kick ass. That's it.
I
That's
love
what it is
that.
for me.
Yeah. And just doing the things every day. Like you said, it doesn't have to be monumental each day, because it's not. It's small little things that are consistent, that can move you to the next version that you want to be. And I love that you say that curve, because that's how exactly how I envision it is. It's not constant. It's not maintaining at this certain level, it's either up or down curve. So even if the down
Absolutely.
curve is super minute and tiny, 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 over time, that curve is going to show itself. So
Absolutely.
if you're able to do the work on yourself, and we'll I keep saying books. We'll keep giving ideas of books too as we go on our podcast because we love to share and all that. And one that I think of right now that is going to lead us actually into our next week's episode, we'll be talking about limits and upper limits that we all have for ourselves and how we tend to self sabotage. And that definitely goes along with imposter syndrome is, as I had mentioned before, we 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 self sabotage. We have so many different ways that we do it. We all know this. So let's talk about it next week. But one book that comes to mind that has been really, really helpful for this is called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And I don't read many books twice. But this was one that I read twice, just in a couple of years space, so not even that much time. But I got totally different things out of the different times I've read it, and that's a sign of a good book too. Is him
Right.
picking up, so we can continue to give other ideas, but this is one that we'll be talking about next week as we talk about self-sabotage.
Yeah, and as we wrap it up, if you have been listening to this and you have felt any of that icky imposter syndrome or you don't belong somewhere, I'm here to tell you, you are who you're meant to be, not who someone told you you were. And I hope you hear that loud and loud, loud, loud. And I'm excited. And till next week, we will be talking about self-sabotage. So stay tuned. This is episode 3, and I'm glad that you stuck through it and listened to us.